Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today with Quickbase. This webinar is going to talk about beyond the job site, why you want to embed lean thinking across the company. We have two wonderful guests today. We have Bob from Quickbase as well as Kamna, and they're going to present for you right now. So go ahead.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining. Thanks, Joanne, for hosting this webinar. As the title suggests here, we are talking about going beyond the job site, so embedding lean thinking across the company. As part of this presentation, we do have myself as a moderator, so I'm happy to meet you all. I've been with Quickbase for about 2 years, just by way of introduction here. Quickbase is a low-code software company that allows a lot of construction and other field-oriented physical industries like manufacturing companies build custom applications. So I'm excited to join you all, and I'll hand it over for a quick intro from Bob.
Perfect. Thank you, Kamna. And really appreciate everybody taking the time today around their lunch break or earlier in the morning or wherever you might be with us here today. I am Robert Saleh. I go by Bob. You can call me Rob Bob. Some of them do in the industry. And really a little bit about my backdrop. I've actually have spent 20 years within my career around Lean Six Sigma and process improvement. And for the first few around like a large Fortune 500 with GE and Wesco Distribution, implementing lean and lean strategies at manufacturing as well as with sales reps. And for the last decade, though, I've had the privilege and enormous opportunity to really begin working within the construction industry to really begin to map out and figure out how does lean fit into this puzzle and understand that even though a lot of this may have came from manufacturing, obviously with Lean Construction Institute and blog and everybody different talking about this, we have a huge opportunity before us. So it's been great. Along the way, I've implemented Quickbase in parallel to a lot of the process improvement. So I was a customer, I was a partner, I was a builder, and really, really excited to talk to everybody today about that journey and really some of the ups and downs that I've seen throughout. So thank you all, and looking forward.
All right. So before we dive in, let's just ground ourselves on why we're here and what we're going to cover. So again, as the name suggests here, we're going to be talking about lean concepts and taking that beyond the field or the job site. So I think we're all pretty familiar with things like Last Planner and some other tools to help with lean, but really to make lean efficient and make an impact across a company, the whole organization needs to be bought into lean concepts. This really goes beyond, again, the field into estimating, finance, HR, and everyone in between. So we'll discuss this more throughout the presentation, but some key learning objectives and things that you'll get out of this presentation. First, we'll cover lean today in the field, and then we'll talk about some common pitfalls and ways you can avoid that while scaling your lean practices. Then we'll cover what this really looks like for enterprise-wide lean, a simple framework that you all can use for your continuous improvement, and how you can use lean to fuel your own growth across your business. And then most importantly, we'll give you some practical tools and next steps so that you can get started right away, the right way. So with that being said, Bob, let's get started.
Let's jump into it. So I think a very good lean practice in the beginning stages is to really kind of set around the room, kind of roles and responsibilities. Kamna, time tracker, timekeeper, keep me honest if I'm going on too long, shut me down and move forward. But we have a lot of content here to go through, probably too much to be quite honest with you. So please, I encourage everyone to write down their questions, use the chat, make this as interactive. And if I can answer any questions near the end, we want to make sure that we have time for that. So let's talk about lean. And I think in the first few slides here, I want to take a moment to just dispel some beliefs that might be out there and permeating in the industry, but also kind of share some of the challenges that I've seen coming from lean in manufacturing and Wesco distribution and kind of like how we defined it. And really, when I first joined the contractor in question and to implement a lean culture, pretty much on day 2, I think I was asked, how much cost savings are we seeing today overall? And we all had a chuckle, and obviously they're pushing and they want to expect change management to occur overnight. And we needed to begin to unravel this onion, especially in an industry, or if your organization has not really jumped onto the lean bandwagon yet. We all know it's a journey, and there's quite a few steps to kind of take first before we begin to take off overall. And I've seen organizations jump in one of two different directions. A lot of times it might even be by the contract dictating it that we need to implement lean out at the job site. So that could be the one sole place that we begin to use the tools at hand. We talk about last planner system. We got a slide next about that, the big room, target value design, everything and above. And they are absolutely wonderful tools. On the flip side of that, we begin to forget about the rest of the enterprise in the office, in lean, and what does that mean to actually embed a culture. So in my role, as we began going out to job site after job site, working to implement these, we ran across just basic limitations, right? We might not have all the resources at hand to manage 200 jobs with lean. And every time we would go out to the job site and we might leave, it's really about sustaining all of the information and all of what we're trying to accomplish so that when we leave the job site, it doesn't just die off. And that was really, really taking me to heart and making sure that we build our champions, that we set up a good training program. But at the end of the day, we all understand why we're doing this versus just checking a box and saying we did last planner system. And I've been on job sites that did that, right? So seeing this through, it's like, how are we going to scale this? How are we going to bring value to the rest of the organization and build something that is going to last for years versus just quick hits? We did it for the contract and move forward with it. So hopefully throughout these presentation, you hear and can take some snippets back. Hopefully we're doing a lot of the stuff already, but maybe with a slight tweak with thinking about how low code, no code fits into that. And I want to kind of trickle that in some of the techniques that I've used for that. So, so we got a big opportunity before us. Kamna, let's move that forward. And so we have a lot of different lean tools that we can use out in the field. And to me, it's about adoption. We always talk about adoption. How is the field adopting technology? How are we adopting lean techniques? How are we adopting XYZ prefab? Whatever it might be out in the field, we obviously have some room for improvement to grow. And so when we look at these tools, I remember being on the job sites, doing last planner system, moving around all of the different tasks and working through our reasons for variance and creating basically templates, whether that be in Excel, you print it out, you have people write it in, you plaster it all over the job trailer, and we would go out for weeks at hand. You'd have to travel to the job site, spend a lot of time, work with it, and it was great. It was valuable. We were able to sequence the work. We were identifying really why is material late and what are the lead times, or maybe we need coordination to be a little bit more effective prior to that. There were a lot of good things occurring. But one of the things that really, as we did one job site to the next, we realized we didn't have the data to constantly leverage best practices across the enterprise. So as we entered that into all of the templates or whatever software we might be using, did it come back at the end of the day to help out with job site number 2 or job site number 3? And there's hopefully buckets of lessons learned of understanding what are the vendor scorecards, or maybe what's happening in certain arenas. And there's data there at our fingertips that we're all grasping for, especially today, and especially as we start thinking about AI and what we can do with that. We need the data to tell us. And if it just dies on a vine at the end of the job, was it advantageous for everybody at that point? So if we just think about lean at the field and the job site, it hits a ceiling. Basically, we're missing that centralized hub of information to always come back and reference. How is this job doing? What are the problems? Maybe we reference daily logs, but there's a lot in the lean tools that we have that we can get more information from. So I want to challenge everyone to really think through the feedback loops. The central tenet in lean, right? As we continue to move forward, you're going to hear me talk a lot about that with DMAIC, but how do we get that feedback loop to get the information back at the end of the day? And that's what I really wanted to focus in on and made some drastic changes to the organization.
Awesome. All right. Well, speaking of that, DMAIC, let's talk about that a little bit more.
DMAIC, maybe I'm going old school here, and I don't know how much it's still prevalent out there, but this was really my first lean journey. And so for those that may not be aware of the MAIC or what it stands for, so it is define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And really, I think a theme out of this presentation is how do we walk away remembering the C? And a lot of times we forget to control any of the change that we might have. And in the fast food society that we have, I think a lot of us want to rush to change. We want to get to future state. We want to implement whatever it is and move on to the next, because honestly, we all are rushing for that job to kind of improve, get ahead of schedule, and be basically cost efficient. But when you look at sustaining a culture and you look at how you're performing internal continuous improvement projects, these are just a short list of some of the tools that you can use throughout. And when we think about controlling and we talk about Poka-yoke or air proofing and setting up standard operating procedures, feedback loops, how much are we really putting this into consideration as we brainstorm the improvements for the future state? And putting dashboards and KPIs at the forefront of the fingertips of everybody doing stuff with the data and thinking through, how do we massage their cockpit at the end of the day? If they were to sit down at their desk every morning and have a dashboard with red lights and green lights and yellow lights, and where is it going to direct us for improvement? Hopefully that begins to tell us, just like we have a seatbelt that dings whenever you put it or don't put it on, same exact concept. And so I want to challenge really everybody here to begin thinking lean is so much more digitally today than it used to be. So a lot of the lean practices that we think maybe have died on a vine in manufacturing have now just been morphed and transformed into the digital environment. So there's a lot of things that we can do with that and improve upon the tool lists that are there. So I'm going to give some more examples throughout for that. But remember the C in DMAIC and really think through how we're progressing through a Kaizen event overall. And I'll get more deep into that, Connor.
Great.
And so I talked about like dispelling some beliefs out there for it. I can't tell you how many times I may have signed up and showed up at a job site or at an office, and we start talking about, hey, we need a value stream map overall. And they start pulling out sticky notes and they start actually going through just basically just identifying what their process was. And in turn, we actually cause confusion. And as we start off any of the meetings that we might have, whether that be coordination meetings, et cetera, if we are not speaking the same language, if we don't know what a shop drawing is versus every other drawing that might be out there, we begin to confuse our audiences quite extensively. It's the same thing in lean. And I've seen lean get a black eye in terms of, well, you call things 5 different ways. Yeah, that's a problem. And so I just wanted to throw this slide up here to say, take a moment to really think through, as we create the lean culture, how we define all of the tool sets that we have at our fingertips is important, and we need to train on that and reinforce it. Don't let that go off on tangents as we move forward. As you see here, a value stream map has some very specific icons and how it's kind of set up in that way. Swim lane process map, standard operating procedures, I've seen it kind of all used intermingly, and it really kind of takes away from the overarching message, I feel. So really excited about this, but really think through and how we define everything at the beginning of meetings is important. So let's use the same language. And along that point, in that same vein, I've heard lean kind of really PDCA take over. I love PDCA. I think it's a great tool. It really kind of helps move us forward. I don't want to take away from that. But lean is so much more. Now, obviously, it can get to a point of overkill, but we all should have know this by this point, right? We have lean principles. Define the value, map the value stream, all the way through to pursuit to perfection. This is the core tenets. This is what we should be thinking about on a daily basis on what is lean. Lean is not just one individual tool. So as we think through the 5 different lean principles, we also have all these other items that really constitute setting up the foundation. So we have lean principles. Go ahead, comment, I think, to the next image. We have 8 forms of waste. All things that we know, right? And hopefully we're putting up visual signage and we're reinforcing and we're seeing the MUDA and how we need to actually transform an organization through these lenses. Setting up training, identifying what is transportation. What does overproduction mean in an accounting workflow? It's really interesting. And so take moments to train on this, set the foundation, but understand that all of this is part of setting up a lean culture. I don't know, keep clicking. And so take those lean principles, take those 8 forms of waste. How do we improve safety? How do we reduce inventory at a warehouse or maybe at the end of a job site where it all comes back? What are different techniques? How often are we doing pull scheduling effectively, the right way, right? Last planner versus 3-week look aheads versus all the different job sites that we might be doing out there, all of which to minimize waste and calculating that up, right? We're trying to find the cost savings of material, labor, OVC. How does it all constitute coming together? Again, PDCA is a tool that you can use in the Kaizen events. It does not define what a lean culture is at the end of the day. And I don't want to shortcut it. We talk about 5S. I actually have a slide later on. I think we all chuckle. It's probably 6S, 7S. I think it might be 37 S's by the end of 2030. But lean continues to adapt and change. I want to make sure that that's kind of prevalent, and adding in Quickbase and low code, no code solutions helps with this journey. And so establishing a 5S program is actually harder said than done. Easier said than done, I should say. So really think through that, establish that as a foundation, and we'll dive more into that at the end of how I've seen low code actually play into that. But we should be thinking through 5S throughout this. And of course, standard operating procedures. And I want to go back to that C in DMAIC as well, and how we should be writing these up and having a database of sorts to kind of house them. And there's pros and cons to standard operating procedures. And I want to make sure it's not just a checkbox at the end of the day, but all of these programs in place begin to enable PDCA, begin to enable last planner system, helps to kind of sustain that for the next champion to say, okay, this is what Lean 101 is, 201, and it can get more and more complex, but it really begins to grow some of the central tenets around Lean that we really want to reinforce in the construction industry, in my opinion. And last but not least, we got 1 or 2 more. Oh, potion planning. We're going to talk about that. I don't think it's spoken enough anymore. It is a Lean tool. If you haven't seen that, we're going to get a little bit into that later on in this call as well. As I mentioned, we have a lot of topics to get through. But think through, how are you cascading your goal settings every year? How are we looking ahead, and how are we aligning all of the different projects in our company under one roof with Lean supporting all of that? So how are we doing goal setting or annual planning is very important. And all of this kind of comes back together, in my opinion, with all of the data in the feedback loops. Whether or not you're creating an Excel spreadsheet or whatever else you might have out there, if it's taking you too long to get the information, if it's taking more than 3 clicks, maybe there's room to do another future state improvement on that. So creating these dashboards, making sure that when you sit down, this is a snapshot of Quickbase for those that are not familiar with it. And we're going to get a lot more detailed into it, but bringing all of these tool sets under one roof begins to kind of push what PDCA really is. And so I just want to help to define that a little bit further. So keep these tool sets in mind, and looking forward to diving in more, Connor.
Awesome. Yeah. Speaking of that roof, let's talk about the house, right? The Lean house.
And we got to have a house to live in, right? I don't know how often in construction we bring it back, because I think we always Lean. I even remember having some people say, oh, Lean's just manufacturing overall. Lean is so far from just that. And I've used Lean actually in healthcare quite often, working with doctors. But think through your house. Think through what it means at your organization. What does stability and standardization mean? And a lot of times as a Lean professional coming in, you have limited resources. If we just go off and do field Lean, we might be forgetting to set these bottom tiers here. And then think about just in time in Jidoko, in terms of like, that's automation, by the way. So like, how are we automating? We talk about AI, we talk about robotics out in the field. There's a lot more coming into this industry that personally, it gets me excited for. So I'm starting to see a lot more synergies between manufacturing Lean and Lean, et cetera. We need to dispel that. And all of this is all the same because we're keeping our customers in mind throughout, our internal and our external. So think through that DMAIC tool set. I think I might even have that slide again. We're going to show that a couple more times to reinforce it. But think through the respect for people, your collaboration, your best practices. Go to the Gemba. Go see how the work's getting done, and make sure that we're respecting everybody along the way. I can't just, with everything else going on in this world, there's a lot of intelligent people. I want to make sure that all their voices are heard, because that's how we're going to move the needle to the next evolution of whatever the future state might be, and allow all those ideas to come into place. Because if we think that innovation just comes from that small little lean team for a $1 billion organization or company, I think we're missing the boat. That's definitely going to create a bottleneck. So it's about the people at the end of the day. Make sure it's there. It has to be center focused, and let's begin to kind of visualize what is your mission as a lean culture change in your own four walls. Again, a lot more than just lean out in the field.
And there it is again.
We're going to keep showing it. And so we talk about last planner. We talk about big room. We talk about target value design. I like this. I actually created a version of this and put it on our walls at our contractor as well. And as you see here, we'll just take a moment, like defining your projects, having a project charter, going out and doing surveys. Maybe you do a Kano analysis to say, is this a nice to have, basically, to say in terms of a change. We begin to move this along, and as we have these Kaizens, we tend to skip steps. We're not measuring, we're not understanding the ROI. That's okay. We just need it to change. Sometimes that's okay. PDCA helps with that, right? PDCA could be a quick hit. We're going to make a change in 3 days. Those types of Kaizens are absolutely needed overall. But there's also longer term continuous improvement projects. So what is the right mixture at your company, and what is your resources and bandwidth to take that on? So as we look at this, where does last planner system come into play? It's probably under improve. Or as you take a look at control, maybe that's the big room, and we're trying to bring everybody together, making sure that we're talking through everything. But I think one of the things, as I began to look at these Kaizen events that I would host for every single department within construction, I began to realize that there's really 3 or 4 takeaways from a traditional Kaizen event, right? You're going to write up a standard operating procedure. You're probably going to reallocate some labor to try something else and see where that might move forward. Maybe you create a new warehouse layout. And oftentimes we would approach IT. Can we make a digital solution to help track and kind of like sustain the new process that we're moving forward with it? And I don't know if your organizations were like mine before. The ideas, it's not that they were bad. It's not that IT didn't really care about it. They just had other bigger pressing priorities at the time. So when I looked at my tool sets and I think about how much time, think about the labor that you had just bringing in C-level suites into your meetings, or executives and VPs to kind of create a new process. That's a lot of time and money, only to do maybe some small changes that wasn't going to impact something that's greater. So what we began to explore was we needed an agile software to help us with that. So as I began to kind of look through, okay, what's my skill sets in Quickbase? What are some other low-code, no-code software? We fell in love with Quickbase. It was a great rapid prototyping tool. And we called it like parallel development. And I always had this kind of idea of like a DNA sequence where lean and low-code kind of go hand in hand a lot. Because if you know really the solution that you're going to use, you could actually prototype a dashboard in less than an hour sometimes, seeing how quickly it might be. Or maybe you're looking at a change order process, or maybe you're creating a whole entire tool tracking process and software that maybe your software just didn't do everything out of the gate, and your process is still adapting. A lot of times we talk about prefab, we don't know where the end game might be. I've seen prefab operations take on 500 different ways that they want to do that. It becomes its own P&L sometimes. So the software that you used in the beginning, or if you jumped headfirst into it, might not be the right software at some point in the future. So how much money, time, when does it make sense to make that leap became a question that we would ask ourselves at our contractor. So using the Kaizen events, taking the process maps that you're working through, and using low-code, no-code in the Quickbase, we began to make rapid change, and it actually increased the buy-in and adoption from the field, project managers, and leadership along the way in many different departments. So I think we're going to dive in more to that. I'm probably harping on that a little bit too much, but Quickbase is an agile, lean tool. That's how I look at it. I think it should be part of that tool set overall. And perfect. We have like, what is Quickbase? We always get that, and we kind of joke tongue in cheek. Quickbase can be anything you can imagine and dream of, essentially, at the end of the day. I think this is what it was built for. It's a blank slate to really create your process. And I can't tell you how many times I've had presidents come up to me and basically say, you brought to life what I was trying to do. We just got back from NICA. I don't know how many times we've heard about, like, I'm being tired of software companies trying to tell us how to run work. We know how to run the work. So we're looking for, how do we get the systems to match your process exactly? So let's start with the process, let's map it out, and let's use basically Quickbase to create the roles and permissions, the dashboards, the reports. How do we use mobile interfaces along the way? It all begins to bring that data in. Quickbase is not going to replace everything. Quickbase can integrate into the point solutions that make sense. We can kind of move that in. But I've seen environments grow from one application to 40 different applications, and it brings clarity to roles and responsibilities along the way, which I think was a lot more important, right? Who has authority to make changes to the process? Who has authority to communicate that? Those simple questions begin to get blurred and have a lot of gray area in that. I think technology and lean practices together, there's a lot more room for improvement with this, inclusive of lean in the field, so.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bob. I'm curious, do you have a little bit more that you want to share about Quickbase? Maybe a quick demo?
Yeah, you want me to go into that? We can do that.
Yeah.
We'll drive into it. So hopefully everybody can see this. I guess you're looking at, can you see it coming?
Yep, looks good.
Perfect. So I think everyone's joined. We've talked a lot about Quickbase and what is Quickbase, and Quickbase can be that one-stop shop where you're creating applications for a variety of different departments. So you can create applications, you can create integrations, you can pull applications off the exchange as we make some of the templated apps to kind of help kickstart a little bit. So just really quick, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but please reach out if anything strikes a nerve. But everyone always wonders, like, well, it'd be great to have a project management system that brings all the jobs together. So how do we look at our WIP report rolled up by project executive, perhaps, and have everything under one belt where you can kind of click around? We can look at, where are my project locations? What's my schedule? How do we look at enterprise-wide scheduling? How do we adapt our workflows into the job management process that we have throughout? So it really starts with kind of the end in mind, thinking about your dashboards, bringing all the data under one roof, and then slowly building out. And I think sometimes as we look at demos, we look at this and we say, well, that's a lot. And we look at software out there, it's like there's a lot of bells and whistles. Do I need everything? It took us some time to build out each and every one of these tabs. So when we think about cost management, and maybe there's an integration to an ERP, or we're doing our invoice process, using something like this, you can hide and show the development as you progress. Because I always kind of talk to our customers, well, do I get everything? My question always pushing back is, we can do as much as your organization allows change management to occur. So we can do it all, but is your organization ready to change all of your processes? And typically the answer is no. So what we found more value in is saying, hey, we're going to incrementally make these changes, create the standard operating procedure. We're going to define who's part of that, all part of that to make process common and moving into it. So really had a big impact, and we covered a lot of different, like, manpower tracking and workforce planning. There's a lot of different ancillary workflows, right? If you just hire somebody, what about safety orientations, payroll, HR? A lot of people need to get involved and probably want to have dashboards, notifications, everything else involved in that. You can begin to build out those unique circumstances that are unique to you and your value proposition and build that into Quickbase for it. So same exact thing with prefab tracking. If we're moving down in that direction, everything is customizable. You can click and drag. It's low code, no code. So I'm not a computer engineer. but I was able to build out some pretty sophisticated applications, knowing basically if you can do a pivot table, I feel like we can dive in here and create some pretty cool things. But as a big takeaway, I think for lean professionals that might be on the line, I needed a way to track continuous improvement projects when I started. So using Quickbase, I just had that as my own individual application to say, okay, leadership's going to want to know how many different projects do we have? What about the request to do continuous improvement projects? Maybe there's a vetting process that needs to occur for that to come in. So this is just a proof of concept app that I pulled out rather quickly here. So it can look and feel anything that you want, and you can add fields, you can add columns very quickly throughout. That's the beauty of this. It's really about creating your tables and data sets and relating that information at the end of the day so that we can take action on it without overwhelming people. So there's a lot within Quickbase. Obviously not enough for this webinar, but we can definitely dive in at a future date as you guys reach out.
Awesome. Thanks for that context, Bob, and sort of sharing the history of where lean has been and how teams have been using lean in the past. Let's pivot over to what the future of lean looks like now.
Spoken like someone who just wants to jump to the future state, right? Now, this is good. So what have we been talking about? Let's just begin to kind of like coalesce this, move it all together. Like, what does enterprise-wide lean look like? To me, it starts with aligning goals and setting up that sustainability. So if we don't know the goals of each individual department in relation to what the organization is trying to do long term, we might be expelling a lot of resources unneedingly in certain areas. So let's begin to put the resources in the right place and begin to do some real true cross-team collaboration. Think through how are we going to attack projects at the end of the day? I think a lot of times we might just take it for granted. And so going through a sequence, needing meeting room space or going to a offsite hotel for a day, thinking through project charters, sponsors, there's a lot involved in that, and setting that stage for everybody to kind of take a hold of that is important. So connecting the feedback loops, it's kind of an overarching theme, right? I mean, we talk about all of the feedback from last planner system, big room, how we're taking tasks for it. Maybe it's from prefab. Maybe it's estimate versus actuals. Maybe it's from a job closeout form at the end of the day as well. So connect your data so that we can take actionable results on it at the end of the day, I think is really what we're trying to say there.
Yeah, and before we move on here, I'm curious, Dylan, if you have any other sort of like thoughts on what we're talking about.
So far, I'm understanding it. I think one thing you want to touch on is what kind of mistakes have organizations made with lean? I think sharing about your experience, Bob, about what people have done in terms of wrong expectations or in terms of misunderstanding about lean and where it should only apply to the field, and also things that you've experienced where management didn't understand what you were doing. I think that helps a lot because one of the things you want to do is make the process more transparent and visible. Because otherwise, they say that we have 1,000 projects. By the way, Bob, you can go and coach all of them on last planner system, or you teach them how to deploy all lean everywhere, right? And it's the process of lean is invisible to most executives. So by making it more transparent what you're actually doing, I think that it's easier to show people who are not in it what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think Kamna, we'll be a little bit flexible here, right? So I think let's go to the slide 14, I think that we had. So let's skip ahead 2 slides.
Sure.
And we'll come back to the X matrix there. So whenever we thought about lean, and I mentioned actually some of the issues that we have with lean, right? It's about like, what is the language you use? What is a value stream map? Not being crystal clear with project charters and why are we doing things in the first place? But a lot of times my executives were just thinking lean is just out in the field. Just to kind of open up their eyes and kind of give some examples, this is obviously a truncated view of what an entire value stream for construction could look like. Each one of us may be representing a different piece of this journey, right? We have ownership, we have general contractors, we got subs. Everyone kind of has their play in this in their own value stream. But leveraging lean can have a lot of different definitions. So as we look at lean for prefab, for example, I'll pick on that right in the middle with the yellow. So it goes back to flow and communication. Maybe we're using a tool for SciPoc to kind of map out what are the different techniques, what's the inputs and outputs for all of this journey. And a lot of this is physical lean that we're mentioning that really adapts well to manufacturing. So everyone's thinking this is lean. Lean is last planar system. But when you begin to go back and look at, well, how can lean be implemented in business development from the very beginning stages? What's not up here is we used an A3. We said, you know what, we're going to use an A3. If you can't put everything for our company on that to actually describe it, maybe we're taking up too much time overall for it. So using lean has to have a place in every single process. So helping every organization, every department head to understand that, no, this is not just out in the field. And a lot of times, actually, I think the GS and the foreman superintendents get frustrated because it's yet another thing they have to get done, when in fact, the entire organization is not off the hook. We have to help out every single department, especially if we plan that we're going to move the entire organization up. That's the whole reason we're doing this. We're not just doing it just for one job, in my opinion. Great. We improve upon it. We get more gross profit. Everybody wins on that job. Wonderful. But we have to elevate the entire organization up. And you only do that by implementing lean in each and every one of these different departments. Overall. And one of the things that we did try to allude to, so like all of the green is kind of like the workflows that can be integrated. So I've seen Quickbase throughout this. Right? We talked about a new hire process. Okay, before we start building or buying a new software, where does it start? Let's map it out. Let's create an application. Let's create those notifications. Tool tracking, fleet tracking. When we take a look at job closeout and what are those different spreadsheets or Word documents I see that just takes out all those best practices and lessons learned, are they dying on a vine somewhere in your SharePoint drive in a hierarchy? If they are, give us a call. We can help you out with that and move forward with it. But so again, think through, how is lean being used? If you're using a spreadsheet, there's a better way out there. I want to kind of come out and tell you that right now for it. Let's get the data, and we're going to need it for AI, so it'll be good. Come, maybe let's go back a slide.
Yeah.
So we don't lose sight of this. And I think everybody on the line can go do a quick Google search, think through what is an X matrix and how do we think about this, right? So yes, this is an Excel spreadsheet and we can move forward with it, but it's an example of what we see out there of how organizations start from the lower quadrant and go clockwise. So 2-second training on this, it's about sitting down with executive leadership to think through what is their 3 to 5 year goals and mission. How do you take those 3 to 5 year goals and make annual objectives? And that's to the left of it. And that's with the vice presidents and whatever department heads you have with that. And then out of those annual objectives, maybe that's creating a prefab shop. Maybe that's going into centralized estimating as opposed to kind of like cradle to grave estimators and stuff like that. So as you begin to think through, these are significant impacts that can take a lot of resources. Those annual objectives become programs, those programs become projects. When you go through this exercise, you begin to identify, are you going to end up with 5 different projects? Probably not. You're going to end up with 100. And the biggest challenging point is actually saying no, saying we don't have enough resources. Our organization can't take on this much change at one point because you begin to align that. This is a very effective tool to go through. But again, at the end of the day, where are you housing this information? Go back to Quickbase, create your application in that OpEx tracker so that you can visualize this and maybe at quarterly updates, give progress updates on how it's moving forward. Are we on track? And as projects come off and on, there should be a process for that. I can't tell you how many organizations constantly change on a dime and say, this is the next project that we have to do. What about the one we didn't even accomplish? Think about what we're doing to the morale and respect for people for each and every one of these Kaizen events for it. So think through cost savings. Are we seeing cost savings, material, labor, OVC? Each one of these projects should have a project charter and a formal review process in lean that we can help out with.
All right, let's skip ahead here a little bit. Talk to me about what this actually looks like, Bob.
Yeah, so we dove into a little bit of Quickbase already. So I think what does enterprise lean look like? Coming back to this, I think you're seeing a screenshot of my field labor. So as we look at this, we think about, well, labor is a big impact right now, and our labor shortages is a problem, right? So having clear visibility of how many people are on each individual job is an effort in and of itself. Having the ability to do it by job and rolling it up to a project executive, rolling it up to your manpower controller, whatever it might be, affects that entire workflow. So imagine the visualizations that you might need to make it effective for it. It's not as simple as just going off and saying, hey, let's go create a new BI dashboard and we're going to see it point blank. Think about your workflow that has to establish who is going to go in and add or create a request for manpower. Are we going to add and deduct or transfer? In those add and deduct transfers are ancillary processes. All of that can be embedded into a system along the way of the process, but put on a dashboard with just the reasonable stuff to see. So we got 73 people that are right now assigned to jobs is basically what this is saying with pie graphs. And you have the ability to click into it. It's just not a stagnant dashboard anymore. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we take for granted, especially in Quickbase. Everyone kind of says, what's your favorite feature in Quickbase? It's the ability to just keep clicking down, as simple as it might sound. I think we're always trying to get the new bell and whistle. Just use the basics here to kind of click into it. So it's about pulling all of your KPIs under one roof for it.
Thanks, Bob. All right, let's take a breath. We just went through a lot here. So, I mean, really, really excellent stuff, but let's break it down. How do we get started?
Yeah, so set up the foundation. Diane, you mentioned about like helping leadership to understand what lean truly is. And we talked about a lot of those main tenets of lean principles. We talk about 5S. Let's just camp on this for a moment, because I think in seeing this in manufacturing, I'll just pick on 5S for a moment. The very first thing you did is you can't fix something if there's too much clutter around. And that much clutter can be on the job site. That could be on a SharePoint drive. That could be 500 clicks in your software that you might be using, just to kind of begin to extend that. So implement 5S, sort it, set it in order, clean it, standardize, and sustain. It's already within that. We talked about PDCA versus lean, and that's C, right? Sustain. It always kind of struck me. So I don't know if you were like me, but we implemented checklists to go out and do periodic audits. So if you do 5S at your office, if you do 5S at the prefab shop, do an audit, track it. But at the end of the day, if you're doing that in Excel, where's that data going? You're just going to keep doing it. We implemented a Quickbase app to actually track 5S for it. So, and make it to what makes sense. We had an issue as well, like month to month improvements. It's great that we do an audit, but how do you reward somebody or award the team that has done the most improvement? It gets really interesting. Is it just, what if they went from 20% on that audit to 80%? They did really good. That is a drastic change versus someone who just constantly scores 80. You want to basically think through your award system. What does that look like? And have the data to back it up and move it forward with it. So really interesting 5S. I think there's a lot that we can do with that. And it's almost the same story with standard operating procedures. So someone says it's so simple. We all probably have a template out there. What are you doing? How did you create that template? What is it living in? And where are you saving that file to? Can't tell you how many times where someone just pulls up an SOP and it says, hey, this was great. 1997 was the last time we looked at it. Lose all of its value instantaneously. So everybody gets frustrated. Lean gets a black eye. It says, well, you do all this work, but at the end of the day, you're just adding more time to my day to track the standard operating procedure. So how do we begin to house that and have automatic updates once a year, 3 times a year, whatever makes sense for your organization to say, hey, go back and track it. So have a clear format, How are you tracking revisions? And a big thing actually we had was lessons learned on those standard operating procedures. So people would read that and embed that as part of their onboarding for new hires. So helping to kind of like does it take 90 days to get somebody up and running and be efficient? Maybe there's room to approve that. That becomes a lean project in and of itself for it. So don't feel like you have to be limited to just SharePoint and Word and Excel. Expand this and think through, how do we keep that moving to sustain any of the change that we're trying to do?
All right, talk to me a little bit about the Kaizen standards then.
Yeah, so Kaizen basically, again, refers to break apart and make better at the end of the day. So we've talked a lot about a lot of different tools, but these are some of the basics that I just think aren't spent enough time talking about. And I can't tell you how many times we have a project, well, just go pull so-and-so from that department. Well, what if they have a big data center job that pops up that they have to go estimate for or pull out? They just affected the Kaizen and the change management that has to occur. So as we think through the participation, who has the authority, who has how much time, they're going to need that project charter for it. And that was a process in and of itself to get implemented. Where do you house that project charter at the end of the day? And is everybody signing off on it? We actually did print it out and have everyone sign it off and framed it, because that's how important these changes are to an organization. So if we just plan on implementing Revit tomorrow, it takes time. It takes a team in a village to make some of these changes. Take the time to think it through and truly define, what does the success criteria look like? Build your internal champions and create that training modules that I mentioned before. But you're also not limited to just the champions. This is the culture. The champions are just the ones, the cheerleaders that are coming out and saying, let's go with it. We're going to push it and move forward. But it has to be culture. And I think that's some of the things that maybe leadership doesn't understand at times, because I've seen that bounce back and forth. We hire a lean department, it's just culture. We hire a lean department, just culture. It's a little bit of both, right? We need that reinforcement continually. We need to make sure those champions are saying this each and every time. Who's creating the process for the standard operating procedures? That became a black hole in a lot of organizations whenever you just disbanded the lean team overall. So we need to make sure to think through, what does that proper structure look like for our own organization, and apply that DMAC framework for it. Always think through that control at the end of the day and make sure that you are poka-yoking it as much as possible. So how do we change the culture? And I think this is probably the last slides that we have for it. So thank you everyone for bearing with us. And so always having an eye and mind for respect. And there's also just some basic fundamental things that we can do. So I think the first click there is just visuals. Let's just get some the principles up on the wall. If you plan on actually doing last planner system, let's get some visuals. Let's help people to see and to reinforce on a day-to-day basis, what are the 8 forms of waste? When they start thinking through that lens, this mass ocean of all of these problems that we have in the world and our organization, you begin to classify it mentally in your head. Oh, it's overproduction. I can give you 15 things that are an issue with overproduction. Let's focus in on this one. Bring that down to a layer, and let's just continue to work through, what are the visual standards? Clean up your workplace, have signages for that, and just really begin to pepper that around and have motivation. I think I don't take that for granted. I think that's very important at the end of the day. And you can actually showcase best practices. Have that job site who actually did a 5S and cleaned out their job trailer. I had them labeling everything. No, I didn't do it. They did that. They labeled where the trash can was. They labeled where the soap dispenser was in the bathroom in the job. I thought it was spectacular. So, but I'm weird at the end of the day. So. Do some training. Think through your curriculum, hire a third party if you absolutely have to, but think through lean training, think through the tool sets that you're going to use, because you might not need all of them. Encourage you to do low code, no code. Encourage you to do Quickbase. You're here on this call for that. I think it's the quickest way to get operations involved into the process and build something digitally to support that. I can't speak enough volumes of how much change that has been able to dictate for a lot of companies, and it really begins to get adopted quickly for it. So use your training, embed Quickbase, think through your meeting etiquette. If you go into a room in a Kaizen event and it's always that one person that's always just dictating the change, it might be one of the loudest voices in the room always, might not be the best thing that's occurring. So have a sign, going back to visual standards, that says, leave all egos at the door. Leave your cell phone so you're just not looking at that and you're engaged. We had a set of like 15 basic rules that we would have whenever we would go into a meeting room so that it would be effective. When I joined Lighthouse Electric, basically the owner of the company would stop by, poke his head in and say, shit, there's a lot of time and money in this room. What's going on? It reinforces the fact that, yeah, there is, but we need to take the time to measure twice and cut once, but we got to do it in an effective way each and every time, respecting everybody at the table, just not the type A personalities. Have that shared language. Have a data dictionary. I've actually seen GE, I think they were ahead of their time way back. They actually had a chat bot that said you could actually type in, hey, what does TLA mean? TLA actually is a 3-letter acronym for a 3-letter acronym. That's how bad we were at GE. So we use a lot of different language. Lean uses language. Contractors use language. Owners use language. Customers use different language. Manufacturers use different language to dictate tools and equipment. Make sure to take the time to explain that and have a data dictionary for your company. Have a thoughtful approach. So compare the current state every single time. Do not just jump all the way. PDCA is great, but it's also plan and do, right? So you got to plan it out and think through what is your current state and your future state, and take the time to get all of the ideas in the brainstorming mode. And I would pause and we would spend a lot of time because people would just want to map the current state and then just make the change. Did we think through, is this the right change that we're doing? Some of the aspects, you might identify a list of 50 different improvements for one process, when the biggest change is around the 3 different items that may have been identified. So you don't have to do everything in the future state. Plan it out. It is that pursuit of continuous improvement all the way to perfection. So are we going to hit perfection? If you hit that, I'd love to talk to you, but it's about getting as close as you can, moving the needle forward and getting to that future state. So have a thoughtful approach, use the DMAIC, create those project charters, put it in a Quickbase, track the data. And then finally is onboarding integration. How many times are we hiring somebody and they leave in the first 6 months? That's impactful to the organization. So if we're thinking through lean concepts, I've actually seen lean be used as a tool to actually encourage, especially the younger generation. They want to come in and make an impact to the organization. They want to know that their voice is heard. They want to be able to make incremental improvements and continue to move forward with that. If they see an organization with these values that come into play, they see this as a place to stay. So lean is so much more than just lean out in the field. I think it is about explaining to leadership about it's all of this, and it takes time to implement all of this. Think through your resources. Where do you need to spend the time for? And I encourage everyone to really kind of put gas in the tank in each one of these buckets and categories as much as you can. So think through that long-term culture, and I'd love to kind of hear from from everybody on the call too, any of the challenges that they've seen along the way. There's that slide again overall. So DMAIC, design, define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Think through your tool sets. Remember the control aspect within this overall. So maybe it's a different lens that you're looking at this now. Maybe you're thinking through your projects and what it might take. Definitely encourage you to use the tools that make sense. Don't make it just a checklist. And you also don't have to drag out Kaizens either. I'm not saying that Kaizens have to be 6 years long. They can be quick, but it takes time to train and to get into emotion with this. And I promise you, you will see results a lot quicker, especially when you use things like low code, no code along the way with that. So parallel development with process improvement. I need to get an image created and copyrighted for a DNA helix, Kamna. That's the takeaway.
Awesome. All right, take us home, Bob.
Yeah, so lock it in with lean, with Quickbase. So error-proof along the way, have required fields, create these dashboards that make sense, that is going to drive action. Don't just create a dashboard that has 500 KPIs on it. Nobody wants that. Think through the lens of a project manager, a foreman, a GF, superintendent. What do they need at the end of the day to go take action? Bring that part up in your Kaizen discussion. Have a session where you're mapping that out on a whiteboard and just drawing it out. Hey, would your life be easier if you had this report that looked like this? Great. And then turn around and go build that in that week without having to delay it 4 months. Think about the power that's going to have all the way through. So error-proof it, put whatever you can. I can't tell you how many times, well, we want to have a prefab process and we have a fillable PDF, but I can't require them to add this in. So we get half the information that comes all the way through. You don't have to live that way anymore. Put in required fields, create the notifications, create the dashboards, use that to control and monitor the improvements. That could be for every single department, not just one or the other. That could be for your OpEx team as well, and enable that execution for it. So encourage everyone to take a look at our website, reach out, and can answer any questions at any point with it. But there's a lot of power here to be had. So lock it in and continue to drive. And I wish everyone the best of luck.
Great. All right. Well, I think at this point, well done on the timing. Nailed it there. But we'd love to open it up for Q&A. So as you all start thinking and digesting what we all went through, would love to just start a conversation here. As you all are thinking about that, I do want to just mention, please reach out to us. Bob's email is listed here so that you guys can contact him directly. A couple other ways that you all can connect with us. We will be at the Lean Construction Institute Congress here in a couple weeks. So October 20th to 24th in Arlington, Texas. Note that we will be at booth number 308. We'd love to connect with you all on site there, show you a custom demo, and get you some more information. And then if you're ready, scan that QR code. You can get started today with the free trial, no risk, 30-day free trial. With that being said, would love to hear from the rest of the audience here. Where are you all coming in from? How'd you think about this presentation? Joanne, would love to hear as well from you, any closing thoughts you have.
Yeah, I mean, we can do some question and answer right now. So there's a few options for you guys. You can write into the chat box with your comments or questions, or you can unmute yourself and ask Bob and Kamya the questions directly. Well, I'll start off with a question. Who are the typical users of Quickbase? Is it the general contractor, the trades, the owners? Who typically uses the product, and what do they use it for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we think through the product and we think through Quickbase, and honestly, I think, not to be too facetious with it, but it's almost like, well, who is your customer for an Excel spreadsheet? And that's the way I think about it. And so our industries really bridge the gap between owners, GCs, the entire AEC, right? The subcontractors, et cetera. Each might use it in a certain different way. We might have companies that have a formal ERP environment, et cetera, and maybe we help to fill in the gaps. So maybe we're kind of like that mortar and the brick, that maybe the software only does 80% of it, and we begin to actually build that connection point that typically people export into Excel, they import it or they retype it and they get frustrated all the time. We can extend those processes and make it match exactly what you want it to do. I've also seen on the other end of the spectrum, contractors use us for everything, quite extensively. Maybe not a complete financial ERP with payroll in that instance, but of paying people. But it's really about the process and the data of what they're trying to accomplish, and seeing it used across the board and extensively for it. So for some core systems, so it can be replace a spreadsheet, be that mortar in between the bricks to integrate, and it could be something pretty robust, like I was showing in that job management application overall. It is across the board. There are no barriers to entry for any of the types of users for it.
So we have a question from Patrick. He says, I work at Harder. Generally, we are a trade contractor, occasionally a general contractor. We use Quickbase for virtual everything, including Lean.
Love it, Patrick.
Good
to have you on board. Yeah. Thanks, Patrick.
When I look at the organizations, what I see right now is that they have a number of things, right? Organizations have Excel templates. They have Power BI. They have apps
Yeah.
that they use. I would say Quickbase is somewhere between the Power BI and the app. Because an app is a big commitment in terms of standardization. So Quickbase is more like you have something you want to standardize, but you don't want to standardize it via Excel sheet because that's harder to update. So it's and it's also more powerful than Power BI. So it's, more powerful than Power BI, but it's not as big of a commitment as a custom app or licensing someone else's app for certain processes. So it
Yeah.
has the combination of flexibility and power and adaptability. Is that what you're seeing, Bob?
Yes, that was very well stated. And I think I use an analogy like rewind the clock 50 years ago, it was all custom code. Everybody just, hey, we're going to get into computers, we're going to custom code. I'm probably dating myself. And then you fast forward, we began getting a lot of off the shelf software. And those were your two choices for quite some time until this middle ground of low code, no code kind of came up. And it allowed the business process owner to say, wow, if I can use Excel and create macros and do all this other stuff, I can create things quickly without even having to know JavaScript and HTML or being forced into whatever that off the shelf process was or software was. Let's make it your process at the end of the day. And so we've seen a big increase in this market and environment that is bringing time to value a hell of a lot faster in this market. And you can create some pretty sophisticated instances because the people closest to the work, that's the biggest lean tenet, right? That's why we go to the Gemba to understand it. That's who's really in charge of creating the process and the software at the end of the day if they're going to require it. So I think we see a pretty big play in that arena, and we're seeing a lot of movement and success.
So tell me the importance of speed and quickness in Kaizen, because oftentimes when we create Kaizen events or standards, if it takes too long to implement, people might forget or they tune out or they move on. Tell me why it's important to do this really quickly and be able to agilely and adaptively create these standards.
I think it's the biggest thing at the head of mind, right? I gave a few examples. It's a great question. And you have a group. I've seen Kaizen events be 2 people. I've seen it be 10 people plus all the way through. And it just depends on how much change we're trying to take. And if we're not communicating, if we're not meeting regularly as a Kaizen team, when you get to that future state implementation and you're testing it out, if you're waiting too long, and I've seen Kaizen events where you spend weeks or months kind of planning, and then if you're waiting 3 months to actually go explore all the different softwares, you lose momentum, you forget about what are some of those key aspects in the process that you really wanted to change. And your mindset starts to go, well, what does that software do? Tell me this. Oh, it's all the stuff. It's great, but you actually forgot about the key Kaizen change that you're trying to change in the process that, you know what, it's so unique to you. All right. You tend to actually get people to just kind of shrug it off and sweep it under the rug. Use that time effectively. If you think if it gets extended too long in terms of your time frame, you're going to miss out on what you're trying to really accomplish. So convert things, create that dashboard, test it out, especially with the foreman in the field. If you're bringing them in and it's taking too long to go out, they're going to forget about everything you've done. Their mind is on the job. That they have other responsibilities that they're doing throughout the day. A lean Kaizen event is not their day-to-day job at the end of the day. So if you have the ability to kind of get them involved, see that change, you're going to allow that adoption to occur a lot quicker, and they're going to be bought into it. You're going to say, well, shit, this works. You can move the needle a lot quicker as opposed to wasting all of my time up front. Then you guys go plan whatever it needs to be and then pull me back in 6 months from now. I forgot what the hell we were talking about. I can't tell you how many times I've been involved in that. So keep that momentum going, reinforce that, make those changes, create an application.
Okay, so from your presentation, I have some takeaways and summaries, right? So the first one is low code allows the people who are closest to the work to create their own workflow and allows them to create a standardization for what they want to do. Because at the end of the day, the person who has to do the work is the one that understands it the most. You also want to create that flexibility so that they can update, make changes at any time. And speed to Kaizen is very important because if it takes too long to standardize a process, people forget, they move on. Anything else you want to add to the takeaways, or do you think that summarizes kind of what your key takeaways here?
I think that's great. And I think build the foundation that will grow and be scalable with you. You don't have to hit a home run every single time. Singles are just as fine in a baseball game too. It gets the people on base and continues to kind of move that along. So build that foundation, implement a standard of what your philosophy is, embed Quickbase in that, and see that momentum grow over time. So build that foundation and sustain it.
Okay, we have some time right now for plus deltas. If you have any pluses or deltas about Bob's presentation, please put it in the chat box. So we still have a few people left. I think a lot of people had to leave because other meetings. But it was great for you guys to join us today. And again, the team of Quickbase will be at LCI Congress. So you can connect with Bob and get a demo. You can start a free trial. But I would like to hear any pluses or deltas. We have like 3 people left: Patrick, Kevin, and Denise. Do you guys want to chime in? Okay, we have a question. We have a plus from Kevin. So he says plus is top tier content. Minus is more time. So maybe in the future, dive a little more. But
Deeper.
I thought it was I think it was a good, well presented, and I think everybody enjoyed it. So Patrick says, all good here. See you at Congress. Great.
Hey, fantastic, Patrick.
So I would say overall, it's a very engaging presentation. I think you did a very good job of explaining why lean needs to be done in the whole organization, and also why, if you only focus on the job site, you're limiting yourself to a very small fraction of the potential. And I think that's really the key takeaway, is that having more people be involved is always better.
Yeah, it's great. Well said, Don. Absolutely.
Okay, and we have Denise. So she says, plus is great presentation, good overall context, relatable examples. Delta is she can't think of one, so that's good.
You guys are being too kind. It's always good to get feedback. Always plus in there. So.
Well, Bob, you're gonna share with me the slides later, right? You guys send it to me in PDF. I'm also gonna be sharing this recording out to everybody that signed up, so you guys can watch it with your team, and then also reach out to Bob and reach out to the Quickbase team if you want a demo or you want to see some use cases, some case studies. They have a lot of examples from projects that have been successful. So I think it's good to see kind of what a dashboard could look like. It's good to see what the use cases for your organization is. But thank you, Bob and Tanya. It was a great webinar. And I'll see you both in Texas as well. So we look forward to future webinars with you guys. But I think that this is a good starter for kind of what you're trying to advocate for.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Thank you, Diane, for the time and for everyone joining. Really appreciate it.
Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.